budget accordingly when you need to put food on the table for the children today, not next week. This programme, this policy is actually, it's programmed to fail. It's actually got failure built in. So for all those reasons, I'm sure that the Cabinet will support the recommendation.
Thank you. You know, again, just to reiterate, this is a result of a 10% cut in our council tax benefit scheme, equivalent to 2.6 million. And because we had to protect pensioners and people with disabilities, it's hitting people, working age people, 15,600 working age people having to pay council tax for the first time. You know, I think this is a really horrendous scheme. It's a poll tax really by another name, I think. It really is. I'm pleased that we've been able to do something. Members will recall we put £100,000 in our budget last year to at least try and enhance the advice services that try and support people who are affected by this. And I think the report tonight, this report tonight, is asking for us to set aside a sum of 50,000 to act as a kind of hardship relief fund. That those of us who've been around a long time remember the old council tax hardship fund, where there was a panel of people. I think George, you sat on it, and some of the people that we had come into that, it was heartbreaking. You know, some of the experiences that they were having because of the difficulties they were experiencing with the cost of living. So this is a really, really nasty policy, but I think we're trying to mitigate it as best we can. And I think the £50,000 hardship relief is probably the least that we can do to try and mitigate it. The report also includes in Appendix 1 a policy which sets out the criteria for considering people for this fund. And I think, as it says in the recommendations 12.1, we need to review this throughout the year and look at the kind of take-up, as well as agree that we put this fund in place you know, as quickly as possible. Anne, I think you had a question.
Yeah, well, just to press home the point, Chair, that's been made throughout these last two reports, we're being asked to do more with less, £2.6 million less in this case. And we're now having to put charges on people who were in dire straits already and reeling from all kinds of charges being put on them, bedroom charges, cuts to their benefit, universal credit, you name it. And now, you know, it's absolutely diabolical, you know, and I hope that some of that will find its way to the press, Chair.
Okay, so you see the recommendations in item 12. Can we agree them? Okay, thank you. Okay, so that then takes us on to the environment and sustainability items. Item 10 is the approval of Wirral Coastal Strategy. Brian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would point out that this is a key decision for the Cabinet, and I would mention that the Wirral Coastal Strategy has been in development now for the last 2 years, and it's a management plan for coastal flooding and erosion risks which will cover us in the Wirral for the next 100 years, and it builds upon the policies in the existing shoreline management plan. The strategy has been developed by modelling coastal processes so that flooding and erosion damage can be calculated, and it provides a solution to best protect or adapt the coast and all affected coastal communities and assets within the Wirral. The predicted impacts of climate change and the requirements of environmental legislation have also been taken into account in drawing up this report. The strategy has already been open to public consultation, and where appropriate, responses that we've received have already been incorporated into the final plan. The document looks at the economics of managing coastal defences around the Wirral, and very importantly, it identifies where and when future work needs to be done over the next 20 years. It identifies how much grants will be available from the Environment Agency for that necessary work and how much additional funding will be required to successfully deliver the necessary works. And at the end of the day, Chair, there are two main specific recommendations in the report. The first one is to approve the management and action plans contained in the strategy, and at the same time to instruct the Strategic Director of Regeneration and Environment to explore how funding opportunities can best be achieved and to identify how additional funding, which is going to be required over the next 20 years, can be secured. So it's on that basis, Chair, I commend the report to Cabinet and ask them to approve the two specific recommendations contained within it.
Okay, thanks Brian. Can we group those recommendations? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And that takes us on now to item 11, the Wirral Coastal Strategy variation to fee ceiling. Brian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Contract Procedure Rule 16.2 requires that variations to existing contracts that are greater than 10% of the original contract value need to be reported for noting by this Cabinet. The original contract value of the Wirral Coastal Strategy was in fact £89,314. Approved technical variations have previously increased the contract value to £122,592. And this report before us now advises Cabinet of a further approved technical variation of £8,004, which will take the contract value to a total of £130,596. And this most recent variation has arisen because of the additional work in preparing the strategy identified by the Environment Agency and the lengthening of the contract programme, which are necessary for successful completion of that strategy. And again, Chair, the report contains one specific recommendation before the Cabinet, which is that we need to note the technical variation to the contract, which is in accordance, as I've already stated, with Contract Procedure Rule 16.2. So it's on that basis, Chair, I recommend the report and the recommendation to Cabinet.
Okay, Cabinet, can we agree with that recommendation? Thank you very much. And item 12 is the Scrap Metal Dealers Act 2013. Ryan, you again, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This Act actually only came into force last week on the 1st of October, and it requires, first of all, that scrap metal dealers need to be licensed by the Council, and there is a list of all Wirral sites listed in Appendix 2 of the report before the Cabinet tonight. And secondly, it needs to ensure that people who collect scrap metal need to have a collector's licence, which again is issued by the Council. In addition, there can now be no cash payments for scrap metal purchases. And this report details the requirements of the Act, which came in on the 1st of October. The Council can charge a licence fee for administering the process and issuing the licences, and this report is seeking the approval of Cabinet to those fees being brought in. There are certain duties and responsibilities relating to this Act, and this report before us tonight proposes that these duties are shared between the Cabinet Member for Environment and Sustainability and the Strategic Director for Regeneration and Environment to enable the Act to be implemented within the Wirral. So it's on that basis, Chair, again, I commend this report to the Cabinet tonight. Thank you.
Okay, is that agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Thanks for that, Brian. Okay, that takes us to the Highways and Transportation section, and there's one report here, item 13, which is the updated Transportation Capital Programme 2013-14. And Harry, could you introduce us, please?
Thank you, Phil. As a result of the potential future devolution of major scheme funding to local areas as part of the Liverpool City Region local transport body process, this report informs Cabinet and seeks approval for proposed revisions to elements of the 2013-14 Local Transport Capital Programme for the purpose of funding a full transport business case study exploring the potential replacement of two of the life-expired A54 Tower Bridge dock bridge structures. There are serious concerns about the conditions of the bridges. Should they fail, then Wirral's heavy load route through the docks could come to a halt. And nothing more will underline the fact that Wallasey is an island. The original area was called Wales Isle, and Wallasey is a derivation of Wales Isle. And that centuries ago was Wales Isle. I wasn't alive.
You learn a lot.
I wasn't alive then, but it was called Wales Isle. You read the history of Wallasey and you'll see a reference to it in the history of Wallasey. Anyway, the report also takes the opportunity to inform Cabinet of recent successful funding bids to Sustrans and Living Streets and asks Cabinet to approve the acceptance of the additional funding and committed to the projects identified in the report. Sustrans grant is essentially to aid cyclists and to cycle safer, and Living Street's grant is to aid safer routes to schools and to create more attractive and safer streets. Okay? There are 3 recommendations and I ask that they be approved.
Okay, thanks Harry. Can Cabinet agree those recommendations in paragraph 15? Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so that then takes us to the health and wellbeing section and item 14, public health outcomes funding. Chris.
Thank you. The report before Cabinet proposes funding a number of activities across the Council designed to deliver support to residents in improving their health and well-being. These proposals have provided an opportunity to consider how we can respond to public health issues across the Council as a whole and will directly benefit local people. They are wide-ranging in their scope, covering services from supporting children in care and people with long-term conditions, to encouraging healthy eating and promoting active lifestyles. Many of the projects will also be delivered through working with community and voluntary groups. One of the specific proposals outlined in the appendix is to give local areas an opportunity to decide how best to invest to support public health outcomes. So £25,000 will be given to each constituency committee for this purpose. These are all worthwhile projects and really illustrate the impact of Council taking the opportunity to strengthen its public health role since taking back that remit in April this year. Before I go to the recommendations, Phil, I was just wondering, it was brought to my attention that there's a lot of smaller groups out there who relied on our area forums to get some funding. And I was just going to ask the Director of Public Health if it would be possible that we could have an emergency fund set aside for the moment so that these groups could come and apply for some smaller amounts than they're used to with the area forums, because we haven't really started our constituency forums as we have at the moment.
Fiona, do you want to just come up to the desk and just let us know whether that's feasible? Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question. I will certainly take that away and see what we can come up with and perhaps bring back a proposal for your consideration.
Yeah, that would be great if you could bring a paper back to us.
Okay.
I don't know if Councillor McLaughlin wanted to say something on this.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I mean, I do understand we've got this wholesale review going on in terms of what funding we are giving the voluntary and community sector. You know, if the proposal is being looked at, clearly, you know, I'd hope we wouldn't want to compromise that review in any way going forward. But by the same token, I think, you know, there are a lot of organisations who are finding themselves in the interim in, you know, difficulties where they would have accessed small pots of, you know, small amounts of funding was £500 to £1,000 from the area forums, and clearly because the process is not fully operational, you know, it is, as you've said, Chris, it is difficult. So I just wanted to make that point about the review that we have got ongoing.
Okay, thanks, Fiona. So we'll get a report back with Fiona. Okay, Chris?
So the recommendations is that Cabinet are asked to improve the reinvestment of the public health grant funding as outlined in the appendix. Note the progress will be monitored by the public health team, and note that the proposals will be evaluated for their impact in May-June 2015. Thank you.
Can I just say, I mean, how much I welcome this report. Just looking through Appendix 1, there are some really, really good schemes and projects in here that will make a real difference to people's quality of life. And, you know, one of our key corporate priorities is reducing the health inequalities. And I think, you know, these schemes will really help towards that. So, you know, well done, Chris, for Fiona, for the work that you've done on this. Okay, so can we agree with that recommendation? Okay, thank you very much. Which takes us on to item 15, Healthy Child Programme. Chris?
Thank you, Chair. This report asks Cabinet to agree to the recommissioning of the Healthy Child Programme for 5 to 19-year-olds. Over the years, a number of services relating to the Healthy Child Programmes have been commissioned separately. For example, the mandatory National Child Measurement Programme, school nursing services and the Health Services in Schools Programme. Recommissioning would allow us to develop an integrated specification which would aim to ensure our children get the best start in life. In addition, you will note that we are asking that we investigate the joint procurement of these services alongside those services that will be commissioned by the NHS England area team for Cheshire and Merseyside for the 0 to 5-year-olds. This means we will have the opportunity to have a joined-up strategy for services for 0 to 19-year-olds in our borough. We also have the chance to shape services which we have been told will transfer to local authorities by 2015. While the processes for this transfer are currently unclear at a national level, we still feel it is important to make sure we are able to influence the commissioning of our services for our under 5s. We also have the opportunity through these proposals to ensure that the Healthy Child Programme is developed alongside our proposals for the delivery of children and young people services. So Cabinet are recommended in section 16 to authorise our officers to start the recommissioning process for an integrated Healthy Child Programme for 5 to 19-year-olds, to support a joint procurement process with NHS England for the Healthy Child Programme for 0 to 5-year-olds, and also to ask for a report on the outcomes of the tendering exercise for a final decision on the award of contracts relating to this programme. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, again, I think this makes sense. Can I just say, I mean, I've never understood when the government did the changes to public health, why they didn't include the 0 to 5s,
No.
you know, in that list. It's always been an area that I've just been sort of, I just don't see any kind of logic in keeping that group with NHS England. So, I mean, I think it makes sense in recommendation 2 that we do a joint procurement process with NHS England. I know that group comes to us next year, which makes sense really.
Yes, so we'll be well in advance of next year.
Okay, so can we agree those recommendations, Cabinet? Agree, thank you very much. And third item under health and wellbeing is item 16, drug and alcohol services. Chris.
Thank you, Chair. As in the last report, this paper seeks permission to recommission our treatment services for adults with misused drugs and alcohol. These services account for a significant part of the overall public health budget, and it is intended that we build on the successes of our previous drug services and strengthen our approach to alcohol services. The emphasis will be shifted from an approach which was in place, which focused on getting people into treatment, to one where people will be encouraged to move through treatment services as quickly as possible to recovery, so that they can become fully functioning members of our community. We intend for these services to be operationally live from January 2015, and so need to begin the process of commissioning them as soon as possible. Obviously, we will look to make sure that the services we commission are also cost efficient. The reasons for needing these services are clearly outlined in section 2.12, which provide a picture of need in our local community. So Cabinet are asked in section 15 to authorise officers to begin the recommissioning process to enable the development of an integrated drug and alcohol service, and to receive a report at a later date to approve the tender outcome and award of relevant contracts. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Chris. So can we agree with those recommendations, Cabinet?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. Okay, which takes us on to children and family services. One item there, item 17, proposal for changes to the local funding formula for primary, secondary and academy schools. Tony.
Okay, thanks, Chair. In this item, Chair Cabinet asked to agree a number of changes to the funding formula for schools from 2014-15. That's prior to advising the Education Funding Agency on the 31st of October. This report follows discussions with the Schools Forum and a local consultation, all primary, secondary and academy schools. Department for Education sees this review as a further part of the plans for a national funding formula for 2015-16. Can I just say, Chair, that the changes being considered are more minor compared to those introduced last year. The most significant one is the prior attainment, which is used as a low-cost, high-incident SEN in schools. And the data changes will broaden the distribution of funding across more schools. For example, instead of using data on pupils who do not achieve level 4 in English and maths, this becomes children who did not achieve level 4 in either English or maths. Required change follows a national decrease in the number not achieving level 4 in both subjects. However, in Wirral, with more than twice the eligible number of pupils within this data group and the same level of resources, again the same level of resources to be allocated, this will increase the funding in some schools and reduce the funding in others. However, reductions in school funding, pupil funding, will be offset by protection given by the minimum funding guarantee, and in some schools will also be increased by the pupil premium. Other areas where changes are proposed, an increase in the funding to look after children. Unfortunately, from the sort of initial school responses, this change is not well supported. And what we were only doing really is trying to increase the rates nearer to what the rest of the North West authorities' average was. And we've had a number of briefings with schools. We did extend the deadline. The deadline for the consultation of schools in this area was the 30th of September. We did extend it by a further week, and we got in a total of 26 schools. But again, the opinion of the schools didn't seem to change. I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding. I think a number of schools felt that we were just suggesting extra money because we wanted more multi-agency meetings and that in schools, whereas the intention was, and this I think is a national problem, is that looked after children, their attainments are not as good as they should be, and we need to improve that. And certainly in the children's department, that is one of our major priorities. So I'm absolutely determined that we do get as much funding as possible to increase attainments in that area. And certainly we've been lucky. I think the amount for the pupil premium has increased in this area. Can I just say that the summary of the views of schools I have here, but they will be included in the papers for the schools, for the next schools forum. So, and I'd just like to say that we have changed the recommendation as has been amended, and the recommendation, Chair, that we're putting is that the changes to the local funding formula are made in accordance with the Department for Education timescale. Discussions continue with schools regarding the future level of funding for looked after children.
Okay, thanks for that. That useful kind of overview, Tony. Cabinet, can we agree that recommendation?
Agreed.
As amended? Okay, thank you very much. Right, I've not been informed of any other urgent business, but before we go into extension, I just need to bring the head of legal and member services in to just make a point of clarification in terms of the exempt item. So, thank you, Chair.